Welcome to the Week 9 breakdowns for the Dana White Contender Series. And I can't believe there's only 2 events left. These weeks have been flown by so quickly, and it obviously feels even quicker when your boy's on a bit of a heater. We're 18-1 on predictions on the last 4 weeks of the Contender Series, and I do appreciate all the new love and support that I've been getting, new subscribers, all that stuff. Much appreciated. Again, I put my all into this thing, and I'm glad that's really starting to pay off. And not just with the Contender Series, but over the last couple of months, we've been doing very well in terms of tracked bets and all. So again, appreciate all the love and support that we've been getting in that aspect. Just a quick plug for the MMA Fight Archive. If you guys want to know how I do my research so effectively and so efficiently, it's because of the MMA Fight Archive. We have direct links to past fights for all these competitors, not just for the UFC and the Contender Series, but 17 total promotions from all over the world, where we just recently surpassed 4,400 fighter profiles. Yes, you heard that correct. There are 4,400 plus fighter profiles for you to browse through and research for any fight that they have coming up. We have new fighters being added daily, and doing our best to continue adding to this remarkable database that I've been able to put together for you guys, used by top cappers, analysts, gamblers, predictors, commentators, wink, wink, fighters and coaches, and they all rely on the MMA Fight Archive to ensure they can find out as much as possible about certain fighters. So check it out yourself as well. 7-day free trial. See what all the hype is about. We got over 95 members subscribed. You could be one of those as well, but try it out for free first, and then you'll see what all the hoopla is about. All right. Contender Series Week 9 going down this week. Again, we also have the UFC on Saturday, headlined by Brandon Royval and Tetsuro Taira. I'll have that breakdown out for you guys tomorrow, aka Tuesday, so keep your eyes peeled for that. But I'll also be breaking down OKTAGON 62, which is going to be going down Saturday afternoon, so a little bit of an appetizer to the UFC. I'll have track plays and full breakdowns for that, strictly on the MMALOTN Patreon page. Link for that is in the description below. So yeah, a good bit of MMA this week for you guys, leading into next week's PFL Super Fights card and the other UFC fight night that is going down as well. All right, 5 fights to break down for you guys for this Contender Series Week 9. Let's get right into it. First fight of the night, Sean Gauci coming in at -180, going up against Anthony Drilich, coming in at +150. Now, this is a matchup between 2 Oceanic fighters. I believe they're both from Australia. Both running things in terms of the flyweight division down there, but in separate promotions. The 2 biggest promotions down there is Eternal MMA, which you can actually watch on UFC Fight Pass, and the other one is Hex Fight Series, which has their own pay-per-view type of format. But both guys doing good work in those promotions. We'll start off on the Gauci side, who's riding a 6-fight winning streak, which actually started with the victory over Steve Erceg back in 2017. 6 fights since 2017, so it hasn't been all that active. He did take off 2019 to 2022. I think a lot of that had to do with COVID and the fact that there was a lot of restrictions down there, so he probably didn't have the ability to train to his best abilities and was unable to take fights. But since returning, he's won 3 straight fights. I believe he's finished 2 of those in the first round as well. He seems to have been a decent all-around game, good slick boxing, good hands, good hand speed, and a good wrestling game as well if he needs to rely on that too. But nothing that really jumps off the page about Gauci. He seems to be decent all around. I don't know if he'll break into the rankings in the UFC flyweight division if he does make it to the UFC, but he could, continue to make some improvements and end up surprising some folks. But I do think that he's nothing special. Neither is his opponent, Anthony Drilich, who is a BJJ black belt. I believe he is the Hex Fight champion. I could be getting him mixed up here. He claims that he is the hardest hitting flyweight in the planet. I don't necessarily agree with that. He has some decent power. He normally looks to crash the pocket and land some big shots with some wide winging hooks. Doesn't often look to utilize his grappling offensively, although I'm not impressed with the type of control that he normally puts together. He's usually pushing opponents up against the cage, doing a good job in terms of clasping his hands around the waist of his opponents and kind of just wearing on them from there. Not overly impressed with his strength of schedule either. Great winning streak as well. But again, nothing that he really jumps out of the page, just like Gauci. So minus 180 currently is Gauci, is the line on Gauci. Drilich missed weight on his first attempt earlier this morning, but he did make it an hour later at 126 pounds. I do have to lean on the Gauci side ever so slightly. I think his boxing advantage in this matchup could allow him to dictate the pace of this fight, not to mention his wrestling chops as well. I think he can do a good enough job in terms of defensively speaking to keep Drilich off of him, and then just do a great job in terms of just picking him apart on the feet. I don't think Gauci ends up finishing him. Also something to note, these guys were actually scheduled to fight each other back in April of 2022, but an injury to one of them pulled them out, hence why they are now fighting on an even bigger stage with even higher stakes on the line here. So I'm going to go Gauci. Not a whole ton of confidence here, but I just think his slicker striking and defensive grappling will allow him to keep this in a position where he is going to be most effective and end up winning this fight on the scorecards. Next up, we got a violent matchup here between Vanilto and Antunes, who comes in at plus 400. He's going up against Islam Dulatov, who comes in at minus 550. Now, Antunes is actually the LFA champion here, which he actually won back in March, springing off a big upset over Geraldo Neto. Now, leading into that matchup, I called him a certified can crusher because he has mainly been fighting guys that are just way too old, have horrible records, or they're just very inexperienced. When he is fighting anybody that is providing legitimate resistance, he kind of gets defeated. His knockout power was nullified because guys are able to grapple him and keeping him in positions that he's not really all that comfortable in. I was surprised that he did defeat Geraldo Neto the way that he did. He showcased some decent grappling defense in that matchup, so maybe he is improving, but I think that is a lack of competition against guys that can give him legitimate resistance will probably work against him, probably in this matchup, or even if he ends up making it into the UFC. Good straight shots down the pipe. He has some decent speed, some good power, but outside of that, I'm not really impressed with what I've been seeing from him. So I kind of understand why he's plus 400 in this spot. With that said, Islam Dulatov, very good striker, very nasty striker, nice elbows, good killer instinct, does a great job in terms of just getting the clinch going, utilizing his elbows and his knees to the body. Great work there. Defensive grappling is obviously improving as well. Yeah, he's just a very solid fighter. 9 of his 10 wins have also come in the first round. That one came in the second round. This guy's a finisher. He goes out there, looks to put his opponents away, and more often than not does a great job in terms of doing that. My qualm here is, again, playing such a big line on Dulatov. I wouldn't necessarily recommend it considering the knockout power that Antunes brings to the table. I have seen Dulatov get hit. There are some issues that in his striking defense at times that Antunes could potentially take advantage of, which is why I wouldn't be overly comfortable in the minus 550 on Dulatov. I do think Dulatov is the better technical striker here, even with the few mistakes that he makes on the defensive side of things. I saw the under 2.5. I'm kind of surprised that the widely available total, or at least on BetOnline, is at 2.5, and it's minus 280. I'm going to see if one of these other bookies actually released the 1.5 total and see if we can get anything better than that, minus 180 to minus 200 range, because I wouldn't mind taking some chalk on that, as I do think both these guys will be thrown with a lot of power, and I think one of them will end up coming up with a knockout victory. I am going to lean Dulatov. I do think he is the better striker here, but as Antunes showed us last time around against Geraldo Neto, who's a solid fighter in his own right, he can spring the upset. So I wouldn't put all my eggs in the Dulatov basket. Maybe the under 1.5, or if you want to eat the 2.5 chalk, go for that as well. But I do think violence, but I'm going to go with Dulatov, and Dulatov by first round TKO or submission. Next up, Lucas Camacho coming in at plus 425, going up against Mario Pinto, who comes in at minus 600. Heavyweight matchup here. We'll start off on Lucas Camacho, who has recently gone 2-0 in LFA, has an overall record of 6-0, BJJ black belt, but he seems most comfortable throwing leather on the feet, especially in the pocket. This is a guy that has been hurt in numerous fights, but still battles back from adversity and comes back and finishes his opponents, even though he's badly damaged himself. His gas tank not the greatest, especially what his body language looks like, but he does a great job in terms of just pushing through it, still throwing big shots and still looking to get his opponents out of there. He will definitely fight for your money. He is a guy that's going to be looking to go forward. He might take some big shots, but if he's still standing, he'll likely continue to move forward and try to press his opponent, who may start to slow down after eating too many big shots in his own right too, or throwing too many big shots and start slowing down himself. Pinto, on the other hand, 8-0, comes from the LFL, the Levels Fight League, I believe it is. Has some decent wins under his belt. Throws crisp, clean shots, very good in the striking realm. He's often getting grappled by his opponents, and he showcased very solid grappling defense. His cardio looks to be good as well, as he's gone 5 rounds a few times. Does a good job with pressure, but not overly pressuring or being too aggressive. He just waits for his openings. I believe 3 of his last 4 fights have gone to a decision, just showcasing that he's okay with being disciplined and allowing the fight to just kind of take place and flow as it does, rather than just constantly looking to finish his opponents. I'm assuming that he's going to be facing a lot of pressure here from Camacho, and I do think that Pinto will be able to pick apart Camacho here. I think Pinto will also do a good job in terms of keeping this fight upright and then eventually finding his spots to get the finish. Obviously, he might show a little bit more aggressiveness this time around, considering he's fighting for a UFC title, a UFC contract, and I think that could, that could be a sign of him trying to push the pace a little bit more. It was funny watching the weigh-ins this morning because they both made weight. I think it was 244 for Pinto, 240 for Camacho. But then when they had their face-offs, it's probably one of the more intense / awkward face-offs we've ever seen, with both these guys refusing to take their eyes off each other, so much so that Sean Shelby had to push one of the guys out of the frame. And then even as they were walking back, they're still staring at each other. They had, I think, 2 or 3 more face-offs after them, and they were still staring at each other. You see the cameras kind of just spin around and showcase these guys still staring at each other well after the weigh-in and the face-offs were done. Hilarious stuff. A lot of heat here, a lot of aggressiveness, I'm assuming, from both guys we're going to see. But I do think Pinto is the overall better fighter, better, or at least good enough defensive grappling that he should force Camacho to strike. And then he should be able to take advantage of some of the shortcomings in Camacho's striking game. And from there, we'll see Pinto eventually get the knockout here. So give me Pinto, and Pinto by knockout again. Minus 600. Tough to fully trust on the Contender series, as we've been seeing as of late. But it should come through, and he should win by knockout. Our next up, we got Cody Steele coming in at minus 240, going up against Jason Blair, coming in at plus 190. Now, Cody Steele, I believe, was supposed to fight on week 4 or week 5 against Kamel Otani. Otani pulls out minutes before the fight because he just maybe had an anxiety attack or something like that. He just couldn't get into the headspace of fighting, and unfortunately, Steele was forced off that card, and now he has to prove himself once again here by fighting against Jason Blair about 4 to 5 weeks after that initial fight matchup. But Steele, he's the real deal. I didn't mean to rhyme there, but this guy is the real deal. This guy's a BJJ black belt, but he's taken to the striking game so well that the majority of his wins seem to come from knockout or from knockouts. I believe 3 of his 6 pro wins have come by knockout, and both of his amateur wins have come by knockout as well. I think a lot of people are just scared of the grappling that he might implement on them, which allows him to just get so much respect on the feet, and then he goes out and just demolishes them there. Good explosivity, good cardio to be able to showcase that for 15 minutes if he needs to. And then he has great grappling if he needs to rely on that as well. I haven't really seen him in a bad spot, and he has some pretty good strength of schedule on the Fury FC scene. So I do think he is ready to fight, the lower half of the UFC division. And then slowly start working his way up and possibly finding himself in the rankings. Very solid fighter. I like everything about him. He's taken on Jason Blair, who's now 3-0 after losing his first professional fight at the hands of Ahmad Hassanzadeh, who just recently got signed to the UFC through the Contender series as well. And Blair is just 2 or 3 weeks removed from actually picking up a main event victory for Cage Warriors, where he was able to submit his opponent in the first round. He's a guy that normally relies on his grappling, and he is a guy that's trying to improve the striking aspect of his game as well. Sorry, I don't think that Hassanzadeh fight was the first loss of his career. I think it was the most recent recent loss of his career. But he's still seen as a prospect that Cage Warriors is very much invested in. He's training out of the MMA Fight Academy in San Diego, which is a training camp made by Cage Warriors, or at least their president, Graham Boyle, who's just trying to produce a talent and then eventually try to get them to the UFC. And I'm sure he's managing them, so he's probably getting a cut of their wages as well. But Blair, solid wrestling, developing striking with some big power, but he leaves some holes in his game there. But if he's not able to get his grappling going, things will start to go sour for him, in my opinion. He lost to Jeffrey Craig as well, now that I'm remembering off the top of my head. Split decision loss there. Couldn't deal with the striking of Craig. Had some decent grappling success, but striking was the difference maker there. And I think this is just too quick of a turnaround for Blair to be facing the toughest competition that he's faced to date. And I don't think that he's ready for that next step either. I think he still needs a couple more fights on the regional scene before he eventually gets to the Contender Series or even makes it to the UFC. Thus, I feel pretty damn good about Cody Steele in this spot. Chasen Blair was that hyped prospect that was always super chalky on the Cage Warrior scene, just as Cody Steele was. But now going up against each other, I think Cody Steele should be actually a bigger favorite in this spot. I think he is the better striker, the more dangerous striker, and the better grappler, so he can pretty much dictate where this fight takes place. I'd be surprised if Blair has any grappling success. He might be able to get a takedown, but will he be able to control a position or get off a submission or even get some big shots off from on top? I don't think so. I think we'll see Cody Steele either quickly throw up a submission, look for a reversal, or just immediately get back to his feet, and then from there just get back to his own game. Look for Cody Steele to start walking down Chasen Blair at a certain point, and I think that will eventually open up a knockout opportunity for him, which I don't think he'll have too much trouble with coming through here. So I like Steele. I like Steele a lot in this spot, and I think that he'll finish Chasen Blair within 2 rounds. All right, that brings us to our light heavyweight main event now between Islam Masraf coming in at plus 400 and Artem Vakhitov coming in at minus 550. Now, we'll start off on Masraf. Most people might remember him from back in March. I believe it was for a PFL Europe card where he went up against an opponent that showed a complete lack of respect for being prepared for a fight. Now, what I mean by that is while his name is getting announced and all that stuff, he shows that just hands like a Karolina Kovacevic type approach, where like hands behind his back, leaning on the cage, not really caring, but then taking an extra step and just being very lazy in his approach to beginning every fight. A lot of people were calling that fight fixed because of how quickly he got knocked out. But if you just go back and watch his fights prior to that, that's how he fights. He just comes out very lazy, and then he eventually starts picking it up. But unfortunately for him, he came out way too lazy against Masraf, and Masraf landed a big head kick 10 seconds into that fight and knocked him out. Masraf is a guy that likes to lean on his striking, moves pretty well for a light heavyweight, good combination striking, some good power as well. And if he sees an opportunity for submission, he'll probably jump on that as well. Seems to be a solid prospect. Now, should he have been getting this Contender Series opportunity this quickly? I don't think so. But I think considering the opponent that he's going up against, he's obviously going to jump on the opportunity and hopefully it pays off for him. What I mean by that is him going up against Artem Vakhitov, who has a history with Alex Pereira, UFC light heavyweight champion. Vakhitov actually has a majority decision victory over him in September of 2021, but then Pereira did actually defeat him earlier that year, so they are kind of level, and maybe they could potentially work it out here in the UFC if he does end up making it there, making a name for himself, and then eventually getting a title shot. Obviously, coming from a Glory kickboxing background, you can expect solid striking from him. In terms of the MMA game, it's not looking that great in terms of the guys that he's been going up against. His first fight, he actually lost, but it came to an injury. It was a fight where his opponent was like desperately trying to get the fight to the ground. Then he eventually pulled guard, which launched Vakhitov on top of him, and Vakhitov posted up to try to like kind of brace the fall, and he broke his elbow in doing so. So he was out of competition for several months there. Then he bounced back and finished his next 2 opponents. One of his opponents, horrible takedowns, eventually falling to his back, allowing Vakhitov to get full mount, and then getting smashed from there. And then his next opponent, he landed 2 leg kicks in 22 seconds, and his opponent folded and gave up right away. So he hasn't really been pushed in the MMA game as of yet. We know that he's a great striker, but what does it look like when he's actually facing resistance in an MMA space rather than just a kickboxing space? And that's why I think that he's such a big favorite here, is because of the background that he has coming into this fight. Again, great kickboxer, but he has a history with Alex Pereira, and the fact that he has a win over Pereira makes people think that he's going to be this tremendous talent in the MMA world. But that's not the case. That's not how it always works out. And that's why I think, of course, he's the better striker here, but we have to wonder what his defensive grappling is going to be looking like against a guy that actually could implement it. Now, we haven't seen it completely implemented by Masraf in the past, but this guy looks like somebody that is taking the MMA game seriously as a whole. It's just so happened to work out that he's been able to knock out some of his opponents, but he seems to have competent enough striking that he could eat a few shots from Vakhitov. And again, Vakhitov in his kickboxing career, 23-6 record with only 8 of those wins coming by knockout. So you got to wonder, does he have a whole lot of knockout power that he can take advantage of here? So I am going to predict Vakhitov to win, but these odds are just outrageous. Official prediction will be Vakhitov straight up. But no way would I parlay that. I'm on the side of taking a chip, just a little bit of a slot on Masraf here at plus 400. I think even taking a half unit shot here to win 2 units is not a bad spot. Again, we're kind of fading the hype of Vakhitov here and a guy that has shown some solid understanding of the overall mixed martial arts game. And it's kind of like taking when we were fading Clarissa Shields in PFL, and it paid off for us with Abby Montez. She was still young in the game, but she still had a good enough mixed martial arts mind that she was able to keep Shields on her back and end up winning that fight. That's what we're hoping here with Masraf with such big odds. So yeah, Vakhitov will be the prediction, but Masraf has to be worth a little bit of a shot here and fading the kickboxer coming into MMA for only his 4th professional fight here. There you guys go. Breakdowns for week 9 of the Contender Series. Remember, I'll be back tomorrow for the UFC Vegas breakdowns, and then I'll have OKTAGON 62 broken down strictly on the Lock of the Night Patreon page. Otherwise, appreciate the love. Drop a comment, drop a like, drop a subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you guys again tomorrow. Peace.